Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World with me, John Jordan. So it's the end of the start of the month. So we're looking back at what's happened in November 2022 in terms of investments into what I'm broadly calling the blockchain game and metaverse sector. As ever, this is sort of, I've not really double checked this. There may be a few more things to add in. But this broadly, I sort of look at this sort of stuff fairly regularly. I did do a bit of traveling in November, so I may have missed some stuff. I'll sort of double check it all before we do the big roundup at the start of January. But in 2021, in November 2022, what do we have? We have 21 deals into the sector, and we have $306 million worth of funding announced. So obviously various caveats around that. This is when companies are announcing their investment. That's not necessarily to mean that investment was sort of secured in November. Normally there's a bit of a couple of months between sort of maybe signing terms of agreements and signing contracts and money flowing, all that sort of stuff. So there is a bit of a delay in that, and obviously people can press release stuff whenever they want to. So in terms of how that compares, we'll look at some graphs in a minute, but if we go to October here, we had 20 deals, so roughly the same amount of deals, $240 million in October, so actually slightly more in November. The big deal we saw during the year, during November, was this one here. So Fenix Games, a spin out of Mythical Games, sort of announced $150 million funding round, and actually said they had access to more money, based in Dubai, have access to some, some deep pockets there. We also had WeMade here. They raised $46 million with a convertible bond from companies including Microsoft. So they're a public company anyway, but they've raised some more investment to build on their Web3 stuff. So that's what's going on there. As ever, so the majority of stuff is sort of smaller. So it's sort of seed deals, pre-seed deals, Series A. We have a Series C here actually. So not many Series Cs. We haven't seen many Series Cs in sort of Q4, even Q3. So that was a fairly small. So Thirdverse is a Japanese game developer. So a Series C deal, but fairly small, $15 million. We've seen, Series C rounds being, I guess, 300 million was the biggest, I think, from OpenSea. So that's what we've got in terms of the sort of call it the raw data. Over here we have the companies, the investors who were involved in that. So keep a note of that. But let's go and have a look at what it looks like on the graph. Okay, so here is the first graph. So this is looking at this blockchain game sector, including metaverse, some sort of tooling stuff as well. And this is looking back from May 2021. So we've almost got over a year and a half here. So you can see November, slightly more than October, roughly the same as September. But we can see here, these 3 months are very much smaller than the rest of the year. Even December last year, which was pretty small for that period of time, was getting on for $400 million. And we have these really big months here: January, February, March, April, and May in particular. So 5 months of very large amounts of inflow from venture capital into blockchain games and blockchain metaverse, all that sort of stuff. So roughly speaking, $1 billion going in every month there, and now we're down to sort of 300 million. So big drop off. There's a drop off really. So May was the peak, and then June was down quite a lot since then. So sort of Q2. We'll look at the quarters, but certainly, I mean, Q4 we got December still to go. December generally is quite quiet. So we can see here compared to November to December last year. December is quiet because basically people are on holiday, and I would say probably for the sentiment in the crypto space at the moment is not great, considering what happened in November with FTX. So I just think people sort of are quite keen for 2022 to sort of leave and see what happens in 2023. Maybe we can be a bit more positive there. So I don't expect much to be happening in December. But that's what we've got for the data. The red is sort of is a way of sort of tracking what's happening in terms of stuff like IDOs and NFT sales. So that's the blue area is sort of coming from maybe sort of traditional VCs and crypto VCs and degen VCs. So there's all different sort of elements, but those are sort of investment sort of funds or companies. And the red is sort of coming from sort of retail crypto market. So you're launching a token on a sort of a Kickstarter type, one of those sort of starter type sites, or you're doing an NFT drop or an NFT sale on OpenSea or Magic Eden, something like that. So that's what we're looking at there, and we can sort of see really since in the last few months the red sort of way of funding stuff has sort of really dried up. Really hard to launch NFT collections at the moment. Obviously, we've seen a big move away from paid NFT drops to free mints. Free mints is very much the way that a lot of these things are going. So people giving away effectively stuff for free, and then trying to build value off the back of that. Various ways of doing that. We'll see how that pans out later in 2023, I guess. So that's what we got in terms of the months. Pretty clear trend there. If we look at the quarters, so Q4 last year, 2021, did $2 billion worth. For 2022, first quarter did almost 3 billion. Q2 almost 3 billion. Q3 was over 1 billion, but down. And then we see obviously got another month to go on Q4. So we've got December, but I'd be very surprised if this gets up to 1 billion. So we've sort of seen this over the last 3 quarters, quite a strong decline. Of course, somewhat ironic in some ways. I do think actually this is for investors. This is a sort of actually quite an interesting time to invest because valuations have come down a lot, and a lot of the sort of the frothy sort of companies, the companies who are just sort of in the space because they could sort of put together a good deck and it sounded cool. They may be looking at something else now. Obviously, a few interesting memes saying about how VCs are now not looking at Web3 anymore, looking at AI. But for people who are looking at sort of Web3 game companies and Web3 sort of tech projects, valuations are just much better now. And there is sadly, there are companies who really need to raise money because they've sort of run out of money, which obviously just drives valuations down, and investors like to invest at low valuations because that just gives them the biggest return. So maybe the current situation is sort of it's sort of the inverse of the very high valuations we saw. So maybe I think valuations will probably go up again when we get back into a more sort of solid market. But I think we'll start to see, we'll continue to see a lot of deals, and in fact we've sort of seen that already. So this is looking at the number of deals every month. So have to be a little bit careful with this one because I think the more you look, the more you can find deals. So I wouldn't want to say these are sort of exact numbers, and obviously the number of deals we're seeing here is not enormous. There's not thousands of deals. There are, in early 2021, we were seeing sort of tens of deals, and then that increased. We can see a peak there in March. So we had like over 50 funding deals announced in March. March was sort of the key, sort of peak from that point of view. So I got like 21, and I listed 21 deals in November. I guess if I really looked at it, I could probably get up to 25. And that's the same for every month. So just a little bit of caution around that. But we can sort of see compared to the drop, there is a drop off. So in June we had sort of over 35 deals, and that was the same for April and May. In July, summer's often a bit quieter because people are on holiday again, but had quite a drop down. August, again, still under 30. And then September, October, November, we're down to sort of roughly, could say 20. So the drop-off hasn't been as big as the drop-off in the funding itself. And that sort of makes sense because as we saw with the raw figures, most of these deals are sort of quite small, a few $1 million, maybe up to $5 million pre-seed or seed deals. So you can do quite a lot of those sort of seed deals going on. And what we sort of really don't see at the moment is these sort of big Series B and Series C deals. And that was what we saw at the start of the year, say, with people like OpenSea raising $300 million. Magic Eden later in the year did a Series C, I think $130 million. So we've seen some of those big sort of Series potentially B and C deals are what's not happening now. But there's still quite a lot of activity on the seed stage. And what you'll probably see as well is some sort of companies who potentially would have been going to raise a sort of a Series A, maybe just doing sort of a sort of what we call a sort of a bridge raise, so just raising a small amount to keep them going for a year until sort of times are better. So certainly not all doom and gloom. There's lots of people building. There's lots of interesting projects out there, but we've definitely seen this sort of over the top sort of funding stuff sort of come down, and that's been happening for quite a few months. Anyway, I'll be chopping all this stuff up and doing a bit more of a detailed overview of what's been happening by sort of probably geography and subsector as well. But we'll hold that thought for the start of January 2023. So we look back at exactly what happened in 2022. But this is the broad stroke. I don't think that December will change that trend very much. Okay, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. See you again soon.